Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest launch attempt from Starbase, Texas. I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. Good to have you with us here on this Monday afternoon. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. We're looking live once again at Pad A there at Starbase, adjacent to Boca Chica Beach. A nice view of the waves crashing on shore, quite a bit of cloud cover hanging around, and SpaceX forecasting a decent chance for favorable weather for liftoff. Conditions are currently 55% favorable for a launch at the start of the window, according to SpaceX. So, better than a coin toss. It's on the right side of things, so we'll see if the launch weather cooperates, and perhaps more importantly, or just as importantly, that the ground systems are all in operational order and ready to support today's launch attempt. You're looking at live views of Starbase, courtesy of our friends at Lab Padre. As you can see in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, the time currently is T-minus 1 hour, 57 minutes, 33 seconds, and counting. That is to the opening of the window for today's launch attempt, and currently the T0 that SpaceX is targeting. SpaceX does have a 1 hour long window, so it does have some latitude to play with the T0, especially before they start the fueling process. Unlike a Falcon 9 rocket, though, once tanking of the Starship, both the Super Heavy booster and the ship upper stage, once that is underway, SpaceX does have the ability to hold the count at the T-minus 40 second mark and shift if needed. SpaceX is going to hold the count there for several minutes once, again, we get to that T-minus 40 second point, if it gets to that. For those who were not with us yesterday, SpaceX was just shy of 40 minutes away from the planned T0. However, they decided to scrub yesterday's launch, initially stating that it was a ground systems issue, and then later on, SpaceX founder and chief engineer Elon Musk clarified that it had to do with the liquid oxygen system. In the overnight hours and well into mid-morning, we saw teams that were up on the quick disconnect, that little catwalk that you're seeing there that juts away from the launch and catch tower. That's slightly more on the foreground compared to the rocket. And you can see those feed lines that extend up to the ship upper stage. And there's that little walkway just beneath that. Crews were up and working in that area for several hours to remedy whatever the issue was that caused yesterday's scrub in the midst of fueling. As you can see, though, there, the tank farm vent is underway, and we're watching for the next big vent milestone, which will be from near the base of the orbital launch mount. There will also be a tower vent that is basically parallel to that quick disconnect, as teams are conditioning the feed lines ahead of flowing liquid oxygen, as well as the liquid methane on board both the booster and the ship upper stage. As we're getting things rolling here today, I want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's running the technical operations of the broadcast. We also have assistance by our photographer, John Pisani, in that regard as well. Also want to thank our moderators in the live chat. See, we've got Rick Donner on board today alongside Mark Otto. And just seeing if there are any other mods at the moment. Not seeing any, but if you do see any of the other moderators with the purple crowbar pop in, be sure to give them a big old Spaceflight Now hello. Also, thank you to the more than 1,600 of you for watching along with us live as we're getting things rolling today. If you haven't already, you can do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also, our thanks to channel member Cumulus Granatus for helping to answer folks' questions in the chat. Speaking of our channel member community, we are powered by the wonderful folks that support us on an ongoing basis that make these live launch opportunities possible. So thanks to folks like Sulfur for Lunch, Adam Hart, Damian Williams, Jean Marquis, The Rocket Girl, and many, many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to our member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Speaking of content for the members, if you were with us for our broadcast yesterday, we posted a chunk of the fireside chat that SpaceX Vice President of Launch Kiko Donchev participated in as part of the Space Coast Symposium and Expo on Friday. We'll come back to part of that today, but for the members a little bit later this week, we'll have the full context of that fireside chat up on the channel. In it, Kiko talks about SpaceX's big programs, the ones you're probably thinking of, talking Starlink, human spaceflight, and of course their workhorse vehicle, Falcon 9, in addition to the chunk about Starship that we shared with you all yesterday. So look for that coming to the channel a little bit later this week. Last little bit of housekeeping as we're getting things rolling. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space or spaceflight, or you just want to be like Andy Cochran and offer some kind words of support, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature to have your comment or query elevated for discussion, if, of course, your words are appropriate for the broadcast. Not only will he be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but we'll also be welcoming your support in what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, my friends, is greatly appreciated. Speaking of greatly appreciated, we are once again very grateful that our friend and Spaceflight Now alum, Stephen Clark, current space reporter with Ars Technica, is joining us once again. Joining us now live from Starbase, Texas, down there just along the Rio Grande. Stephen, how are you doing today?
I'm okay. Well, good afternoon. Happy to join you on the broadcast, and fingers crossed for a launch today here at Starbase, Texas.
Fingers crossed from all of us. And for those unfamiliar with Stephen's work, you can find his articles alongside his colleague Eric Berger over at Ars Technica's website. He's also on X. Former, as I mentioned, Spaceflight Now alum. He was editor here at our publication for more than a decade and has been covering the space program for many years and is a great voice of wisdom to have on the broadcast. So appreciate Stephen spending some time with us today. Stephen, just as a place setter here, the weather forecast is about 10% better today than what SpaceX forecast for yesterday. So just want to get your perspective on the ground, what you're, I'll put the caveat that you're not a formal meteorologist, but what's your sort of sense of today versus conditions yesterday?
Yeah, well, I think the conditions here are pretty comparable to yesterday overall, although it has been drier today. We had a rain shower move through Starbase yesterday, around this time, maybe a little earlier than this, in mid-afternoon. Then it cleared up nicely yesterday. Today it's been dry here, although there are numerous thunderstorms off to the west, as there were yesterday. But so far, all that's holding 20, 30 miles off to the west from our location here on the Texas coast. There are some clouds overhead. Looks like possible anvil clouds that have blown off the tops of some of those storms have been blown over Starbase. Not sure if that will be a concern. I know down at KSC that might be a concern for triggered lightning, but I don't know. We don't know the weather rules specifically spelled out for a Starship launch here at Starbase. So I would keep that in the back of your mind, that is currently, the clouds cover over the launch pad currently looks like an ample cloud, although, again, don't know if that is a constraint or not for a Starship launch. We shall see.
And for folks' awareness that don't particularly pay much mind to the weather when it comes to launching through thick clouds or potentially anvil clouds in the vicinity is conceivably a danger to the rocket, since not only lightning in the area might be a threat to the vehicle itself, but if a rocket travels through thick enough cloud conditions, it can generate its own lightning, essentially kick up enough static electricity to present a danger to the vehicle, or if there were a payload on board, to the payload. So just to give everyone context for that. As we're coming... Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for those of you who are interested in that, go to YouTube or Google and search Apollo 12 launch lightning.
Exactly. You can also head over to the 45th Weather Squadron's page, which is the group of meteorologists that manage the launches here, both at the Kennedy Space Center as well as at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, and do an excellent job of helping the launch providers here to navigate the various conditions with rockets that have varying needs as far as wind speeds and cloud cover and all that jazz. Coming back to the mission at hand today, though, Stephen, of course, we got about 40 minutes outside of a potential launch yesterday when teams decided to stand down in response to an issue that Elon Musk later revealed was regarding the ground oxygen system. And given the amount of work that was happening on the quick disconnect area of the ship upper stage, it appears to be connected to ship. In one of your closing remarks, you mentioned it was a fairly rare thing to see Starship scrub, not from a weather update, but from ground side issue. Just wondered, context in your mind of how yesterday ended and expectations for today.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Will. We did see that frenzy of activity on the QD arm, the quick disconnect arm, at the base of the ship throughout the early morning hours into the mid-morning, really. And for a time, it seemed in question whether there might be a launch attempt tonight. The SpaceX countdown clock on their website paused at T-minus 12 hours and holding early this morning, leading to lots of speculation about what was going to happen today, whether there be a launch attempt today or perhaps another delay till tomorrow. However, looks like the technicians working, up there 250 feet or so above the ground got the problem fixed, at least to SpaceX satisfaction. And we will see if there are any leaks or anything like that crop up during the propellant loading process, because it seems like that's when it appeared yesterday everything was going well in the countdown yesterday until shortly after propellant load began, which is when they ended up scrubbing the countdown.
So one of the things, Stephen, as we're just about 30 or so minutes away from the SpaceX launch director making the call on prop load, that I wanted to talk to you about, that was a little bit of added context from yesterday's launch attempt. Unfortunately, as everyone knows at this point, there was not a technical engineering talk about Starship, but maybe as a slight consolation to that, we did get this short clip that was published by Elon. So want to play the video, which is going to be on a loop. The first part is with Elon's words attached to it. So let's listen in for this first time, and then we can talk over, and I want to get your thoughts. And you can start as soon as you hear Elon stop speaking. So let's go ahead and listen to this real quick.
And here I am at the Starship factory in Starbase, Texas, right by the Rio Grande. You can see the barrel sections of Starship being built. These are 9-meter barrel sections, about 30 feet in diameter. And the nose cones. This is the largest flying object ever made. It has twice the mass of Saturn V, and will have ultimately 3 times the thrust. So, pretty happy.
So, Stephen, we don't often get these more expansive views inside the manufacturing facilities down there at Starbase. Maybe just top-level thoughts of being able to see the assembly line of the various pieces and parts of Starship, and then we'll go into more detail after that.
Yeah, well, it's very neat to see inside the Star Factory. The nose cones you're seeing right now on the screen are kind of on the south side of the factory, with the windows there. When you're driving down Highway 4, you can actually see the tops of those nose cones lined up in the factory, and it's very, very cool to see from the perspective of the car. And but looking off to the far end of the factory, you can see those barrel sections, 9 meters, 30 feet in diameter, making up, I'm not sure if those will make up the ship or the boosters, but a very, very large rocket factory. My colleague Eric Berger had a story about a week ago talking about how SpaceX has built the machine to build the machine. And SpaceX wants to churn these ships out as often as once per day, in the more distant future, which is comparable to what Boeing, the rate of Boeing production of 737s, and those are ubiquitous in the skies today. But of course, in the near term, they have to get the machine working, which was really the crux or thesis of Eric Berger's story, and that's what we're here for today, to see if SpaceX has righted the ship, so to speak, with Block 2 of Starship, to see if they can get this vehicle all the way from the launch pad to the Indian Ocean in one piece, and gather the data on the flaps and the heat shield and all the other things that the engineers are really hungry for, that information, to make sure the designs of the ships we're seeing here, which are version 3s, I presume, don't need to be changed based on having the experience of flight data from version 2, because the whole point of version 2 was to feed into version 3 in terms of, okay, version 2 is a stepping stone, it's an intermediate step. We want to make sure we've got the design correct for version 3. Well, version 2 has so far, in many ways, perhaps they've got the propulsion system issue licked, since they had more success in that part of the flight during the launch sequence on the previous mission back in May, but still don't know how the heat shield's going to perform, don't know how the flaps are going to perform, and we'll see if they've got the issues that caused the problems on flight 9 back in May, and also with the Starship that exploded on the test stand back in June. They're kind of fixing one problem to find another one at this point, and it would be nice for SpaceX to get a full flight so they can get a full measure of data, a flight of data to know, okay, we're on the right track with where we're going with version 3, or do they need to take some steps back and redesign some things. As you can see, version 3 already well into production. They're not waiting on this data, nor they're going to move on with version 3. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is version 2 is supposed to be kind of a prototype for version 3. So it would be nice to see a successful version 2 flight before they get into version 3.
So let's say, for argument's sake, that past is essentially prologue with this mission, and by that I mean they launched today and we once again don't see a fully nominal flight of the Block 2 ship upper stage. Do you think, given that I believe the going understanding is there's one more Block 2 ship upper stage that is yet to fly, that would presumably be ship 38, that they go ahead and try to launch that at some point? Or do you think if today is another unsuccessful flight as far as allowing ship to perform all of its flight objectives, like deploying the simulator Starlinks, doing the in-flight relight of a Raptor engine, and then performing a controlled splashdown in the Indian Ocean, do you think it's becomes more necessary to launch that final Block 2 version and try to make some changes between now and then? Or do you think it would make more sense to just really put all their energy into, getting version 3 out to the pad as quickly as possible, given the necessary fixes that would be needed in that scenario?
Yeah, well, I don't know, actually. I think there are arguments to both sides of that. If today's flight goes well, then when I say well, I mean they get through the launch with no leaks, no engine failures. They successfully deploy the Starlink simulators. They do the Raptor engine relight. They re-enter the atmosphere of the Indian Ocean as planned, and bring the ship down, within the error circles around where it's supposed to be, splashing down in the Indian Ocean off the coast of northwestern Australia. If all that goes well, no major problems, I could see an argument for just going ahead to version 3 if it's ready. We don't know exactly when version 3 will be ready. It's behind ship 38, and ship 38 maybe 4 to 6 weeks away from being launch ready, most likely. So can add some time to that. I think I'm thinking out loud here, but just it may all boil down to when version 3 is going to be ready from a hardware perspective. If today's launch goes well in version 3, they think they could be ready in October, November, then I can see an argument for just waiting for version 3. But they want flight data. I think the whole way this program is set up is an iterative design process where they test. They're very hardware rich, and to me, from that philosophy, it would make sense just to go ahead and fly a vehicle if you have one ready. So I can see an argument for flying the final version 2 ship 38 in that case. However, we've seen SpaceX skip over vehicles in the past when they've had a new block coming online. So we'll just have to see. I really have no idea. It's a long-winded way of saying I have no idea, but that's a kind of an overview of the arguments for either way.
Well, I think it's good to play the devil's advocate and, consider both options, since they're, at this point in time, seemingly both, maybe not equally valid, but both very valid routes for whichever way SpaceX may end up going. So I don't think you can discount either out of hand. Before we continue our discussion, though, I see we're T-minus 1 hour, 34 minutes, 45 seconds and counting away from the opening of the window and the first launch attempt for Starship. So let's take just a moment here and talk about the countdown timeline. These are the milestones that we're expecting to see today if all goes well and there are no snafus with any of the ground systems or the weather doesn't prove too troublesome. About T-minus 1 hour, 15 minutes is when the SpaceX launch director will make the call that they are ready to begin with prop load. With this version of the ship booster combo, they're going to begin with ship fuel loading at the T-minus 53-minute mark. The last few launches of Block 2 upper stage have begun with liquid oxygen load on the upper stage, but they've inverted it, going to a previous style of a timeline. After that, at T-minus 45 minutes and 20 seconds, that's when lock load will begin on the upper stage, followed minutes after by booster fuel load, so liquid methane going into booster 16. T-minus 35 minutes is when the lock load on the booster will begin, and at that point, all 4 tanks will have LOX or fuel flowing into them simultaneously. T-minus 19 minutes and 40 seconds is when the Raptor chill down sequence begins. Similar to a Falcon 9 rocket when they flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps to protect, on a Falcon 9, the Merlin engines. A similar sequence will happen regarding the Raptor engines on both stages of the vehicle, since it's just a couple minutes into the flight when those upper stage Raptors are called into action. T-minus 3 minutes and 20 seconds is when ship loading wraps up. Same is true on the Super Heavy booster about 30 seconds afterwards. As I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, if there is an issue that comes up at T-minus 40 seconds, SpaceX does have the ability to hold the count for several minutes. But assuming that everything is cleared, SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 30 seconds ahead of liftoff. The flame deflector just beneath the orbital launch mount will be activated in the final 10 seconds. The Raptor ignition sequence begins 3 seconds ahead of T0. At that point, as SpaceX likes to say, excitement guaranteed. Of course, that all depends on everything going right between now and that T0 liftoff point in just about an hour and 32 minutes from now. Clock's still running. We'll let you know if that changes or if there are any updates to the T0 as we roll on through the count this afternoon. We mentioned earlier in the broadcast that our members later this week will be able to watch Kiko Donchev's full talk in front of the Space Coast Symposium and Expo that happened on Friday. But if we can go to a piece of tape from that, this part of the conversation is when Kiko was talking about bringing Starship operations to here in Florida. Want to play this piece of video for our audience today, and then Stephen will talk a little bit more about Starship in Florida on the other side.
The bulk of the development of Starship is happening in South Texas, in Brownsville, Texas. We have a town called Starbase there. The first really ever orbital commercial spaceport is there. That's where all of our test flights have happened, just the ship test flights and now our orbital test flights. But as we stabilize that rocket, we're going to operationalize it and we're going to bring it to Florida. So we're working on 2 separate environmental, sort of huge environmental studies, both at KSC for using Starship out of 39A and on the Space Force side at 37, which is the former Delta Heavy pad. So we've gone through a very lengthy process. It's actually been, there's some thought like we're just kind of rushing into the Starship in Florida thing, but we've actually been working on this problem for maybe 6 or 7 years now. And I see Janet's in the room here. We stopped and started and stopped and started, and through our partnership with both NASA and the Space Force, we cut no corners. We're doing the long environmental studies, and we're making sure that when we bring this rocket here, we're ready in a way that is helpful to the community and to the other operators. There is some fear. Oh my God, Starship is going to shut down everything else that's happening at the Cape. It's not true. Sure, is it a big rocket? Yes, it's bigger than Falcon 9, bigger than Falcon 9. Actually, it's the world's biggest rocket ever built. But we've done a lot of work to basically figure out how we shrink the impact. SpaceX believes that the best spaceport is a spaceport that and not saying it will happen like this, but that multiple launch providers could launch multiple times a day. We want to help the DoD and KSC design a spaceport where, it's not just SpaceX, right? We want Blue Origin, we want Relativity, we want all these new entrants, we want Stoke to come in and be prosperous and be successful. And fundamentally, the spaceport is capable of handling that. Physics says it is. It's just how do we figure out how we work together and how we deconflict, and then actually go do some hard math and some hard engineering to make that happen. I think we've got a really good plan. I think we've got a really good plan working with our partners, and it's going to be very, very exciting to watch the first launch of the Starship from Florida.
It will be. And I think it's also exciting from the NASA perspective what this will bring to the Artemis program as well, and landing eventually our astronauts on the surface of the moon.
Yeah, HLS is a huge, so the human landing system, right, is a huge priority of ours. We got to help NASA achieve that goal of landing on the surface of the moon, right? So we're on contract to basically do a transfer of the astronauts from Orion, once it's in lunar orbit, to a Starship, and then use the ship to actually go land on the surface of the moon. That tech will be really important and key, and same stuff that it's going to take to achieve that goal is also going to enable the Mars goals, right? The big leap is you got to refuel on orbit, right? So this idea that you'll launch a ship, and then you'll launch another ship, and then you aggregate propellant, right? And that lets you get enough energy to then move a ship through the entire landing sequence. But over time, that same exact architecture is like the needed game changer for actually sending a ton of stuff to Mars and being able to not just land a rover, but land like 1,000 tons, 100, many tons to the surface of Mars.
And so in that section, of course, going a little bit beyond just Starship in Florida, also touching on Starship's role in the Artemis program as the human landing system, or HLS, that will be factored into both the Artemis 3 and Artemis 4 missions as currently architected. But Stephen, to bring you back into the conversation, starting with the Florida piece on it, I wonder your thoughts on how Kiko framed the thought of bringing Starship here to the Sunshine State. He also mentioned, I think a little bit later on in the talk, about really trying to put folks' minds at ease, especially in that room where you had a lot of business leaders across Brevard County, which is, of course, where Florida Space Coast is located, and the Cape and KSC are. There is some concern about the impact beyond just the launch operators of what Starship could mean. And so I think part of the talk was to help assuage folks' concerns that SpaceX is being very methodical with both how they're going to operate Starship as well as the timing with which it's being brought here. So I'll let you jump off of any of those points that either I mentioned or that were brought up in the video that you'd like to go with.
Sure, Will. I think SpaceX has plans to greatly expand their launch and production capacity. We showed Star Factory in that video that was shared by Elon Musk on X a little bit earlier in our broadcast. And we're talking about launch pads now, where SpaceX has announced plans for, or is currently already building, or even in one case operating, 5 Starship launch towers, 2 here at Starbase, 2 at Slick 37, Complex 37 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, and 1 at Launch Complex 39A, in addition to catch towers as well that will be used exclusively to catch boosters and ships returning from space. So the launch infrastructure is expanding to keep pace with the production capability that SpaceX has built here in Texas and plans to also build in Florida. In terms of the impacts on other launch operators, I think one of those graphics showed a map, and I don't have that map in front of me right now, unfortunately, but showing the arcs of where the yes, there we go, where the areas that will have to be evacuated during Starship launches or testing, like static fire tests. And in the red, I believe that's the arc for static fire testing. That would necessitate, for a test at Complex 39A, would necessitate an evacuation or clearing of Pad 39B and Space Launch Complex 41, which are the homes of the Space Launch System and the Atlas V and Vulcan rockets by United Launch Alliance. And then the yellow arc that we're seeing, I think, is for a launch. and that would extend out to Slick 40, which is the workhorse launch pad for SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket. That would have to be cleared for a launch of Starship from 39A. These arcs, they may shrink eventually as SpaceX demonstrates the reliability of Starship. However, they're going to have to work closely with their competitors in the launch market, as well as NASA and the Space Force, who are responsible for safety at the spaceport down at Cape Canaveral, to walk that fine line between streamlining operations to make sure that they're not impacting other operators, but also maintaining safety of all the personnel and visitors on the spaceport during one of these launches. So we've heard a lot of protests, primarily from the United Launch Alliance, about these plans for as many as, I think, 44 Starship launches per day from 39A and many more from Slick 37 down farther south, because they're worried about they're going to have to clear their launch pad or their control center or their integration building during every one of these static fire tests or launches. However, I think there is a chance eventually for these arcs that we're seeing in red and yellow, or orange and yellow, to shrink over time, and also shrink the time period, temporally speaking, of how long these launch pads need to be cleared. So, for example, right now it takes less than an hour to load a Starship and Super Heavy booster with propellant. That may actually get faster as more launches happen and more infrastructure comes online at these launch sites. So perhaps, even if these arcs don't shrink, that the clear times will be an hour or two instead of, multiple, 4 to 6 hours, as sometimes we see with some of these operations today. So I think there's a healthy debate to have. However, I would point out that ULA, of course, has their own bias in terms of they're a competitor with SpaceX, and I think there's any of these companies, including SpaceX, including what we just heard from Kiko Donchev. Again, we talked yesterday in our broadcast about posturing. We have to keep that in mind, that all these companies are competitors, and you have to take everything that's said with a grain of salt.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as the timeline, yes, SpaceX has been getting faster with its fueling. It will also be important to see how much they can shrink the need to close the road in the multiples of hours right now ahead of a launch. I believe road closure today on that public road that leads out to Boca Chica Beach, State Road 4, that happened at about 11 a.m. this morning for a launch that's happening no earlier than 6:30 p.m. Central Time. So, if you bring that kind of operational timeline to, just using Pad 39A as the example here, since this is what the environmental review data is from, that would be quite a bit of impact for ULA at Slick 41 with its Vulcan rocket. I mean, at this point, eventually Vulcan will have operational capabilities out at Vandenberg Space Force Base, where right now Starship is not a player, but that's where we're not looking for the first Vulcan launch from out west until sometime in 2026. So until then, it's, SpaceX and ULA will have to share this sandbox, and, we don't have, unfortunately, a comparable duplicate of this type of arc for Slick 37, but viewers can see where that pad is, the bottom of this graphic here. So you have to imagine if you've got, SpaceX wanting to launch from Pad 39A 44 times per year, and that would also indicate 44 static fires of both the ship as well as the Super Heavy booster. So 88 static fires on top of up to 44 launches, and then down at Slick 37, I believe it's 77 launches is what they're hoping for between those two towers. It's certainly not a small impact on the launch providers like Blue Origin and ULA, and especially some of the smaller folks like Stoke Space, which is working on Pad 14, and Via and Phantom that have Slick 13 a little bit south of 37. So it'll be interesting to see how everyone plays in the sandbox, as it were. I just want to go to this quote before we move on real quick from Tory Bruno in the run-up to the launch of the most recent Vulcan rocket. He said it, and I'll quote him here during a pre-launch teleconference, quote, "Starship is an interesting vehicle in that it's not just another rocket on the range. It is of an unprecedented size, and the request that's been put in for the license is at a very, very high launch rate. We're counting on the Space Force and the FAA to do a very thorough analysis of that and how it will affect not just the ecological environment, but also the launch environment." He then goes on to say, quote, "There are certain operations you can't do on your pad when another vehicle is fueled due to the energetics that are associated with that, and that's part of what the range has to do in directing traffic with multiple users that are there now. This new user will be, as I said, unprecedented. It's much larger than a Saturn V. It's something that has not been on the range before, so they need to do a very thorough and careful analysis of that." End quote.
Yeah, well, just to expand on that a bit, I haven't seen this information recently, but I know a few years ago, every time there was a Falcon 9 launch from Pad 40, the vertical integration facility, the big vertical hangar where ULA assembles Atlas V's and Vulcans, had to be cleared. The launch pad itself for Atlas V and Vulcan was outside of that arc for a Falcon 9 launch at Pad 41, but the VIF, the assembly building, had to be cleared for each and every Falcon 9 launch from Pad 40, and of course those are happening multiple times per week at this point. I don't know if that's still the case, if the VIF, the vertical integration facility, still has to be cleared for every Falcon 9 launch, or if that's changed, but that was the case and was a concern for ULA, even for just Falcon 9 launches a few years ago.
Yeah, that's a really good historical context, but good framing as well. Speaking of giving folks a frame of reference, if you look at the launch tower here at Starbase, as SpaceX is just about an hour and 16 minutes ahead of the planned launch of that Starship rocket, you can see the tower vent is now underway. A good sign that SpaceX is gearing up to start the fueling campaign, with the go for tanking expected within about a minute and a half, if in fact SpaceX is keeping on its current timeline. Taking a moment to pop over and look at our live chat. Want to thank the nearly 4,000 of you who are watching along with us live at this point in the broadcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click that like button and share the stream. It allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Time now T minus 1 hour, 13 minutes, 28 seconds and counting. As SpaceX prepares for this launch from Starbase, Texas, coming up in a little more than an hour from now. And of course, there's plenty of activity happening on the Falcon 9 front. Next launch is coming up tomorrow from the West Coast. That is the NOWS mission from OHB Italia. That is a ride share with a host of other satellites also hitching a ride, including a couple from Planet Labs and several that are being managed by ExoLaunch. That mission set to take flight from Vandenberg Space Force Base at 11:53 a.m. Pacific, 2:53 p.m. Eastern, or 18:53 UTC for our friends around the world. Next launch coming up from here in Florida, right now at least, is scheduled to be a batch of Starlink satellites set to take flight on the Starlink 10-56 mission, lifting off from Pad 40, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Wednesday was scheduled to be a couple of back-to-back Starlink flights, but at this point in time, one of those, Starlink 10-11 off of Pad 39A, has now slipped to the morning of Thursday, August 28th. Taking a look out the window here at the Kennedy Space Center press site, the strong back there at Pad 39A is back in the upright position as SpaceX is adding the launch mount to the TE before that is lowered again and it rolls back into the hangar there at Pad 39A. To keep tabs on what's going on at 39A, you can always head over to our 24/7 live stream. That is Launchpad Live. You can watch as the transporter erector rolls back into the hangar and eventually emerges with a Falcon 9 rocket. As the venting rolls on here at Pad A down in Starbase, we're awaiting the start of fueling, which is set to begin at T-minus 53 minutes with liquid methane up first. That'll be loaded on board the ship upper stage. Ship 37 is on tap today. Once upon a time, Ship 36 was planned to launch the Flight 10 mission. Of course, it had an anomaly following a successful single-engine static fire test. SpaceX was fueling it out at the Massey's test facility in order to perform a 6-engine static fire test, but an issue with one of the COPVs on board caused that ship to explode and damage a number of different testing infrastructure pieces. COPV is a composite overwrapped pressure vessel, and it contains gaseous nitrogen, which is used by SpaceX for Starship's environmental control system. SpaceX came up with more stringent oversight and checks for its COPVs to lessen the probability of that coming up again as an issue for future testing campaigns. It also came up with a creative solution to get around the damage that was done at Massey's and preserve additional flight opportunities this year. It created a special apparatus that was added to the orbital launch mount, which allowed for the ship that you see here on your screen right now to perform both a single engine as well as a 6-engine static fire test, and then a spin prime test. Before that was removed, the ship was brought down and they got into configuration to allow Booster 16 to take its place on the orbital launch mount. And Ship 37 arrived once again. The ship was moved out on Saturday night and integrated to the top of Booster 17, atop the hot staging ring that you see between Ship 37 and Booster 16. Following the scrub yesterday, Elon Musk also took a picture underneath the orbital launch mount and gave a nifty perspective on the 33 Raptor engines that will be powering Ship 16 once the rocket is ready for flight. One of the test objectives today is to test an off-nominal landing scenario. So there will not be an attempt to catch the Super Heavy booster back here at the launch tower. Instead, it will splash down in the Gulf. But before it does so, as part of the landing burn, it will use 2 out of the 3 center engines that you see there on the screen. Normally, a proper landing would use all 3 of those center engines for the final piece of the landing burn. But SpaceX is going to test the booster's capability in performing a safe landing if one of those 3 engines were to fail during the landing attempt. So to compensate, it will use one of the middle ring engines in conjunction with 2 of the center engines. The conclusion of the Super Heavy booster landing burn is set to take place at about T plus 6 minutes and 40 seconds after liftoff. To help illustrate what I was just talking about with the landing burn, I want to bring in this graphic that was designed by a nifty graphic designer named Boca Chica, who is kind enough to allow us to use this infographic as part of our broadcast today. You can see with the engines in white representing the engines that will be ignited during the landing burn, the final piece of the landing burn. Time now currently T minus 1 hour, 1 minute, 54 seconds and counting. As we mentioned in our discussion of the fueling timeline, the SpaceX launch director, if they are still in fact targeting the opening of the window, should have given the go-ahead for the start of prop load by now. That said, it was around the 1 hour mark yesterday when SpaceX actually announced that they were go for prop loads, so we may yet get notice of that from SpaceX in the next minute, 2 minutes or so. We do believe that SpaceX has entered into an unplanned hold with the time at about T minus 1 hour and 19 seconds. And we do have a new T0 of 7:44 as well. So we're going to go ahead and retool our countdown clock and put that back at T minus 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 8 seconds. Once again, for those who may just be joining us, SpaceX has adjusted the T0 for today's launch attempt of Starship Flight 10, pushed it back by 14 minutes past the start of the window, so now looking at a liftoff, if all continues to move along as expected, at 6:44 p.m. Central Time, 7:44 p.m. Eastern, 23:44 UTC for those joining around the world. SpaceX does have an hour-long window to maneuver around, so if it does need to make any additional adjustments, it still has plenty of latitude to do so. Time now T minus 1 hour, 8 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Once again, we are also past the point at which the SpaceX launch director should make the call on the start of prop load for today's Starship Flight 10 mission. Again, as a reminder, though, based off of the timing of things yesterday, it was closer to the 1 hour mark when we got the word from SpaceX that they had, in fact, given the go for the start of the fueling campaign. So even though we have not received an update as of yet, we still have about 8 or so minutes before it would be more pronounced of an absence of news for us to have not heard anything. So we will wait and see if SpaceX decides they need any additional time beyond the little bit that was just added. It's also unclear if the adjustment was related to weather or some technical issue or thing that they needed to work through. For those who were not with us earlier in the broadcast, from a weather standpoint, as we can also see some of those clouds building in behind the rocket from this vantage point, SpaceX said there was a roughly 55% chance for favorable weather today, an increase of about 10% compared to yesterday. As we are awaiting confirmation that SpaceX is ready to begin fueling its Starship rocket, let's take a moment to step back in time and talk about the previous flights that have been accomplished underneath the Starship program. Of course, the first flight kicking things off back in April of 2023. With these first few launches of Starship with the version Block 1 of the ship upper stage, SpaceX did get progressively better and better going through Flight 5 and Flight 6. Flight 5, of course, notable since it was the first time that SpaceX was able to catch the Super Heavy booster using the chopstick arms. It created quite the sonic boom for those of us who were there in person at the time. Considerably louder than Falcon 9 booster coming back and touching down at landing zones 1 or 2, I'll tell you that. Flight 7 is when SpaceX transitioned to using the Block 2 version of its ship upper stage, which you can see, of course, the most recent one ready to fly there on the right-hand side of your screen at Pad A. SpaceX will not attempt to catch either the ship upper stage or the Super Heavy booster this go around. Presumably, SpaceX's first catch attempt of a ship upper stage would be after they've transitioned to version 3 of the rocket. But that's a little speculative on our part at this point. They do have one more Block 2 ship before they move on to the Block 3 version of the upper stage. And assuming that SpaceX is able to have this ship 37, perform a nominal flight and make it to a safe splashdown in the waters of the Indian Ocean, they will get some good data, and data that they've not been able to get since flight number 6, on both the heat tiles as well as this go around having the catch fittings that are on the ship upper stage that would be used for a future catch attempt, to see how those performed under the stress of re-entry. SpaceX has a number of experimental heat shield tiles on the upper stage. Those are designed to give SpaceX a lot more information as it works towards creating its ultimate goal, which is a fully reusable heat shield, one that is designed for minimal, if not zero, refurbishment that would be needed before a ship could be turned around for a future flight. But as we just mentioned, it has been since Flight 6, since SpaceX has been able to get the good data on reentry. Since Flights 7 and 8, they lost the ship before it finished its ascent burn, and then Flight 9, they lost attitude control. So they didn't get that good nominal flight data that they were, of course, ideally hoping for. We're almost at about an hour away from the planned liftoff of it looks like we do have another shift in the T0. We're now back to about 1 hour and 16 minutes ahead of flight. We're going to adjust our clocks here momentarily. Stand by. The new T0 time is now 6:59 p.m. Central, 7:59 p.m. Eastern, 23:59 UTC, so about halfway through their hour-long launch window available to them today. As we've been keeping our eye on the weather, want to go to the satellite view courtesy of NOAA's GOES East satellite, and you can see at the latter part of this loop, conditions really starting to solidify as far as the clouds are concerned, really bubbling up over the Starbase spaceport. Of course, SpaceX hasn't commented on, well, hasn't issued any comments since it noted that weather was 55% favorable for launch today. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of good data on the weather constraints for a Starship launch. That's not something that SpaceX has really publicized up to this point in time. So there's a good bit of context that we're unfortunately missing when we talk about SpaceX's ability to launch with the conditions that we're starting to see. But further buildup in clouds is certainly not ideal. I'll say that in a broad sense. Not necessarily a showstopper, but if, as our friend Stephen Clark was suggesting since he's down there at Starbase, it looked like some anvil clouds were creeping into the area, that would present a more challenging setup, since an anvil cloud has the potential to extend the threat of a thunderstorm further out from the center of that weather system. Also worth noting that the tower vent has ceased at this point in time, or is reduced down to just a trickle. You can still see a little bit of that liquid oxygen being vented, but certainly nowhere near the big vent that we have been watching. It could be, given the tapering of the vent, like what we see here at pad 39A or 40 or 4 East at Vandenberg. Once the venting stops, the lines are at their proper thermal conditions and are no longer needing as much LOX to flow through them to get them at the right temperature. If we see the vents really kick back up again, that means SpaceX is needing to do some additional thermal conditioning. So we'll watch the tower for additional signs like that. time now, once again, T-minus 1 hour, 7 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. As we've mentioned now a couple of times, based off of yesterday's mode of events, well, at this point, SpaceX should have made the call on the start of prop load. It may still be another few minutes yet before the actual determination is made and publicized that they are go for the start of fueling. So we will give it another few minutes before there may be a shift in the T0. But of course, given that it's happened now a couple of times during this launch broadcast, we'll keep a very close eye on that happening potentially again. We are joined one more time by our friend Stephen Clark, reporter with Ars Technica covering the Space Beat. Stephen, welcome back. Feels like deja vu a little bit from yesterday with these launch delays, but as we were just talking before you came back to the mic here, that this one may be more related to weather, just giving the buildup of clouds over Starbase, although we don't know definitively, but sort of what it feels like it might be, just given what goes east looks like at the moment.
Yes, Will. Again, I agree that we don't know for sure, so I want to caveat that. But I have the same assessment as you. I think it's likely weather-related. We are starting to feel some very light rain here at Rocket Ranch. We're a little over 3 miles to the southwest of the launch pad here in South Texas, right against the Rio Grande River. And so starting to feel some very light rain. We've heard some distant thunder off to the west. The storms, the worst of the storms were with heavy rain is I don't know, 10, 15 miles off to the west of us at least, perhaps more. But we have heard some distant thunder, and we're seeing what I believe is the anvil cloud blowing off of the top of some of those storms to the east, blown by the upper level winds out over our position here at Starbase. So for those of you who are veterans of launch viewing, you may know that anvil clouds are a concern for most rocket launches, especially those in Florida, which is obviously the lightning capital of the world, or at least the United States. And they don't want a rocket, even if there's no lightning observed in the immediate vicinity of the spaceport. They don't want a launch vehicle going up through a cloud that has an electrical charge and could trigger lightning as it descends through the cloud deck. I'm wondering, again, this is speculation, so I want to make sure that's clear. I'm wondering if that is what we're seeing today here at Starbase with the anvil cloud overhead. I had a discussion with someone else here a little while ago. Obviously, SpaceX has very... Go ahead, Will. Sorry.
Sorry to cut you off, Stephen. We do have a word from SpaceX in the last 30 seconds that they are go for prop load this time. So just want to throw that out there for the audience. That is the first official update from SpaceX that we've heard since the overview of the weather. So that's certainly encouraging news, but please continue.
Yeah, very, very good news. So we'll see how far they get into the prop load and if they can make a run at launching. The window goes till, I believe, 7:30 p.m. local time here in Texas, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. So they have they're about halfway through the window in terms of the delay they've had so far. So they still have a little bit of time to work with. But going back to the discussion about anvil clouds, they don't want a rocket climbing through a cloud with an electrical charge that could trigger lightning, even if there's no lightning in the vicinity of the launch pad that's observed. And I was having a discussion with someone here at the Rocket Ranch a little bit ago, talking about, SpaceX obviously wants daily launch, multiple launches per day of Starship eventually, and at some point there will have to be a re-examination of some of the weather rules around launching rockets to make it more like an airport operations. Obviously, this is many years into the future, but we don't know what the specific rules are today. This is a test program, and I would assume the weather rules are a lot more stringent now than they will be for an operational launch. But again, we don't know what the rules are. We're just purely speculating based on you and your experience and my experience with a lot of launches at Florida at Kennedy Space Center, and we're trying to apply that to here at Starbase, but the rules may be a little different.
Yeah, I would love to sit down with the weather officer that SpaceX has on staff down there at Starbase to get a little more clarity on that. But and like I said, we just have to rely on our Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy experience as well as other rockets from the eastern or western ranges. Hard to believe there's already been 103 Falcon 9 rocket launches so far just in 2025 alone. But that is the blistering space or pace that SpaceX wants to set for itself. And Kiko said they're still on track for 170 before the year is out. So it's going to keep us all in the space reporting business quite busy between now and the end of 2025.
Yeah, it's certainly a blistering pace of launches, and you have a front row seat to that. Obviously, Will down at Kennedy Space Center, and I can only imagine the excitement and maybe a little stress that goes through a space reporter's job when there's a launch every other day.
Mostly the lack of sleep is the thing that both literally and figuratively keeps us up at night, but it's all for the love of the game, and we're happy to do it.
Yep, there are worse jobs.
Amen to that. Well, one thing that we haven't really touched on too thoroughly in our conversation today, Stephen, is the milestones and the objectives that SpaceX is trying to achieve with this flight. Of course, a lot of them have been laid out on the table before in the last 3 launches, and everything for the ship has been unable to be capitalized on. For you, what are you most looking forward to if ship is able to ideally get further than it did last go round, but most ideally get through a full flight profile? What do you, in your mind, think is the most important thing that SpaceX needs to demonstrate on this flight besides just getting through it without a huge anomaly?
A couple of things. One, we've talked about this yesterday, the heat shield. I think that's a key thing that SpaceX engineers want to get data on. This vehicle, just like the previous 3 flights that failed before reaching reentry, has some modifications to the tiles on the heat shield, different designs, including some metallic tile designs, as well as a tile design that has active cooling, which would be a very novel design for a spacecraft heat shield. I'm not aware of any orbital class spacecraft that has had a similar actively cooled heat shield before. So I know the engineers are got to be eager, very hungry for that data, because the data that they get from this reentry is going to inform the future designs of Starship, including version 3, which is, as we've seen earlier in the broadcast, those version 3s are already being built. So they don't have the tiles applied to them yet, so to speak. So there's still time to retrofit them for any changes or any lessons learned that they get from this mission, from a reentry, if they get that far on this flight. The other thing is version 2 ships have the modified flaps on the nose of the Starship, at the very top of the Starship, that are a slightly different geometry and design than we saw in version 1. We want to see how those operate while the spacecraft is descending through the atmosphere out of the Indian Ocean, to see how they respond and help control the vehicle's attitude as it comes down through the atmosphere. So one of the big purposes of version 2 was to test the new heat shield designs and the new flaps. And in three launches so far, they haven't gotten to that point of the flight. They haven't got any flight data on that. And just getting to that point now with this flight would be a great success, that they've potentially solved the propellant system issues that have hamstrung them and affected and caused the failures on the previous 3 launches. And so that would demonstrate that they've got that potentially solved, and to get the heat shield data, I think, would be a big win.
And of course, at some point, SpaceX wants to operationalize Starship, and doing the deployment of the dummy Starlinks is also going to be a big milestone to get through. We've seen the door open and then close before, but we've not seen those dummy Starlinks get jettisoned just yet. So think that's also going to be, of course, on a suborbital flight path this go around. They won't be released down into orbit, but just seeing how the so-called PEZ dispenser can operate in space, safely release those Starlink simulators, and then close back up again for a safe reentry. Something that SpaceX is also very keen to actually get through this go around.
Exactly, Will. I think that's the other thing I would point out is again the PEZ door, the PEZ dispenser for the Starlink simulators. Could be some really cool video seeing those deploy too. So looking forward to that. That's something we haven't seen before.
Exactly. We're, as far as our timeline of things, T-minus 56 minutes, about 50 seconds remaining. Coming up, our next milestone in the countdown is going to be the start of ship fueling, which will begin with liquid methane on the ship upper stage at T-minus 53 minutes ahead of that T0 mark. That'll be followed at T-minus 45 minutes and 20 seconds by liquid oxygen flowing on board the ship upper stage as well. Maybe retreading a little water from yesterday's discussion, but for those who were not here for that part of our conversation, and of course we've got 55 minutes to go through before we get to the planned launch of this Starship rocket. You know, one of the things that we talked about, of course, is Starship's role as the human landing system for the Artemis program. Bringing this graphic of Starship docking with the Orion spacecraft. One of the big milestones that we're going to see as part of the Artemis 3 mission, and if Gateway isn't ready, potentially Artemis 4 if that holds. But we'll be 2 astronauts traveling from Orion into Starship and then descending to the lunar surface, being down there at the south pole of the moon for about a week or so, and then making their ascension back up into lunar orbit, redocking with the Orion spacecraft, and then making their way back home. Stephen, there's a lot we don't know about this version of Starship that right now is just a rendering on screen. I know there's, of course, hardware floating around Starbase that has various mock-ups and pieces and parts of the HLS version of Starship. But again, a little retread from yesterday, but for those who are not part of that conversation with us, what are some of the main things that, you know, let's just say if we don't get the technical update from SpaceX, but between now and the end of 2025, what are you most wanting to know about HLS version of Starship and where things stand?
Great questions, Will. I'd like to know, first of all, when version 3 is anticipated to be ready for the first flight. Version 3 of Starship will be the version that is designed to actually connect to one another in low Earth orbit for refueling testing. And that is a really important prerequisite for any Starship mission beyond low Earth orbit, whether it's to the moon or Mars or any other destination in deep space. They have to be able to aggregate a lot of cryogenic propellant, methane and liquid oxygen in a depot or depots in low Earth orbit, and then have the ability to launch Starships at a rapid rate over the course of a few weeks, a series of, we don't know exactly how many, but 5, 10, 15 or more Starships to fill up a vehicle, a Starship vehicle that's going off to the moon as a lunar lander for Artemis, for example. So really would like to know when Starship 3 is anticipated to debut, what the test program is going to look like for Artemis or for version 3 of Starship, and a schedule for the in-space propellant transfer, and maybe kind of a sober evaluation of the risks involved and some of the testing that may be underway on the ground to prepare for that important milestone going forward, because that's something, cryogenic propellant transfer in orbit has never been done at large scale. We're talking hundreds of tons of propellant will need to be transferred between multiple vehicles to make this reality. So I really would love to hear where that is in development. The other thing we talked about yesterday, and I'll just briefly mention, is the interior crew cabin, the crew accommodations for the astronauts who will be flying on Starship to the moon or to the lunar surface and then back into space to get back into the Orion spacecraft to return to Earth. What the crew compartment looks like, and also what kind of crew controls are there going to be, because the last update I've received officially from NASA, this is a little bit stale, it's a few months old, at the beginning of the year, was that SpaceX and NASA hadn't settled on whether Starship will be fully automated as Crew Dragon is for the lunar landing and takeoff, or the crew will be in manual control, and if the crew is controlling, will it be touch screens as we see in Dragon, or a more conventional cockpit layout? My take is there's some strain between, or disagreement between SpaceX and NASA, particularly the astronaut office, on what that layout will look like. And I think those are very important things to ask. We heard Elon Musk give a very visionary update on Starship, a talk back in May, and would love to hear a more technically updated presentation from him or anyone else at SpaceX, for that matter, on where things stand. Some of the interim milestones to reach the point of eventually going to Mars, which is, of course, Elon Musk's ultimate goal with Starship, is to help create a settlement on Mars. And that is many, many years away. And the discussion of interim milestones, I think, would be really useful and help add some realism to all of these ambitions.
Yeah, and one of the pieces that would be really good to know as far as the risk posture to the mission is, once NASA has a firmer grasp of how exactly SpaceX is going to be performing the ship-to-ship propellant transfer, how much tolerance they have in a mission like that. I mean, I'm just imagining, if it takes, once you have the Starship tanker in low Earth orbit, then it takes maybe 12, 15 additional flights to fill it up to the proper levels. If, say, on flight 11, there were to be an anomaly and one of the transfer tubes, doesn't disengage properly, and it either bends something or breaks something, or, a worse anomaly than that, then how far back does that potentially set up for an uncrewed landing demonstration, in the road to Artemis 3, or, heaven forbid, if that were to happen in the campaign of Artemis 3, what would that mean for the human landing system program and that Artemis 3 flight? Would that just entirely scrap it, move it down the road? These are just questions that we don't have good answers to.
That's very true, Will, and I think the reality for a lot of the questions is SpaceX and NASA don't have the answers either, and that's what the point of the entire test program is to gather data and learn about how the system actually flies, how it operates, how many refueling missions are actually needed, because they can model this in computers, how much boil off of liquid oxygen and methane they can predict, in software program, a computer program, but they want to anchor that in real flight data, and that's, of course, SpaceX's modus operandi. Is they iterate, they launch, they're hardware rich, they launch missions, they gather data, and fix and repeat. And I think we'll see a lot of that during the in-space propellant transfer testing. I think that's likely to take a couple of years to really fine tune that and get it to the point where it's predictable. That's even barring a major setback. So we'll see. I would really just like to know when that test campaign is projected to begin right now, and also just a discussion of some of the uncertainties around it and what they hope to learn and the challenge involved.
Yeah, exactly. And part of the long pole in the tent that we discussed yesterday, of course, is also, the readiness of the AXCMU suit that Axiom Space is in the mode of, constructing, developing, testing. It did complete its series of runs in NASA's Neutral Buoyancy Lab, according to Axiom Space and its partner KBR. That was as of earlier this month. You're looking at some video that I shot at the Space Symposium back in April when they brought the AXEMU suit out to show it off for folks attending that conference. So it was nice to get a look at it up close. But, of course, one of the challenges for getting this suit ready is not just, the exterior, but really the environmental systems, the ecosystem that'll be sustaining the astronauts within that large pack that you see on the back of the AXEMU suit, and that has proven certainly tricky. So to see how this fully designed and developed suit will interact both with the Orion spacecraft as well as the HLS version of Starship is, something that we've seen a little bit of testing on, as far as the integrated test that was conducted between SpaceX and Axiom Space. That was last year, and I think we're just about to reach that point in the video where you'll see some of that integrated test work right after we get a close-up of the AXEMU patch there on the shoulder. Actually, this is the Neutral Buoyancy Lab testing that is former JAX astronaut Koichi Wakata, who is now an employee with Axiom Space, one of their astronauts, alongside Michael Lopez Alegria and Peggy Whitson. Note for the timing of things that ship LOX load is also underway now. This is video here of the integrated test, so you can see a little bit of that inside the interior of the mock-up of the human landing system. This would be in the area, I believe, referred to as the garage, where astronauts would egress and go out to the elevator and then make their way down from the higher level of Starship near the nose cone and then descend down to the lunar surface, which you'll see the elevator here in just a moment. But certainly, Stephen, lots of testing that still needs to be done between these two providers, Axiom Space and SpaceX, for how this will all work together now that they have a final version of the suit and hopefully a final version of HLS in the near future.
Definitely agree, Will. I think those are the two big things to watch progress on are the suits and the HLS Starship lander. But I think it's also important to keep an eye on, there will be many eyes on it because it'll be a historic mission in its own right, but Artemis 2 next year. That's only going to be the second flight of the Space Launch System, the first flight of Orion with a crew, with astronauts on board, with a full life support system, and lots of important tests on that mission ahead early next year that, mission may not go perfectly either. Hopefully it does, but there may be some bugs to iron out coming out of that mission, little things that they learned that they need to change on Orion or SLS for Artemis 3.
And as our local weatherman, I appreciate you stepping outside a moment or two ago to get this picture that you just posted on X of that anvil cloud that you were referring to earlier in our conversation that is kind of hanging out near the pad, which is never what you ideally want to see the run-up to launch, but certainly good to keep a weather eye out. and certainly potentially a good sign of how things are progressing today. SpaceX has actually begun its launch broadcast.
Yeah, I'm
Seeing inside
curious to see if
launch control center here.
Yeah, hopefully he gives an update on the weather soon.
And we are hearing off mic that SpaceX is tracking a 70% chance for violating weather now at this point. So conditions have deteriorated since SpaceX's last note that they were 55% go. Now there's 70% chance of violation, or a 30% chance for favorable weather today. Let's go ahead and listen
our
to
VP
this
of Starship
comment you see
Engineering. Thanks for
Elon
being
Musk
here,
and Bill
guys.
Riley.
I know we got a rocket
It's
about
the
to get off the
technical talk
bat,
that
but
we were
let's start people off like high level. Like, why are we here? What the hell are we doing here?
Well, I don't know about everybody, but I'm here to try to build into the future that I imagined and dreamed of as a child, where starships with people are out among the stars exploring the universe.
Yeah, so the why, it's always important to explain the why of things. And the why of Starship is that we want to be a multi-planet species to extend consciousness beyond Earth, I think for two main reasons. One is to ensure the long-term survival and prosperity of life as we know it in consciousness, which if we are a multi-planet species and ultimately a multi-stellar species out there among the stars, the probability of survival is much, much longer. That's kind of the, defensive aspect or life insurance for life collectively. But then there also need to be things that are inspiring and exciting and that give you reason to live. Life cannot just be about solving one tragic problem after another. There must be also reasons to get up in the morning and be excited about the future. And a future where we are a spacefaring civilization is infinitely more exciting than one where we are not.
And we're doing it all pretty unique location. I mean, the pad's behind us. We got rocket on the tower. We got another tower with it. We're sitting inside Star Factory. And I mean, it wasn't like this for very long. This is all pretty brand new.
Yeah, I think we moved Starship here in about the early part of 2019. So we've been coming that entire time and seeing the site evolve from a double-wide trailer and a tent where we built Starhopper to the first suborbital test flights. And now we have behind us 2 towers for the first time as we build towards the first operational flight from the second tower at the end of this year. And this beautiful building, 1,000,000 square feet, where we're able to work towards a production line of Starships.
Yeah, the SpaceX team has done an incredible job of building out really the most advanced rocket manufacturing facility that has ever existed. This is far beyond any rocket fabrication facility that has ever been built. This is essentially alien-level technology, and it was all built here basically down by the Rio Grande River and close to the beach. It's an incredibly improbable location, and this used to be a sandbar. I think we're about, 3 feet or about 1 meter above sea level. It really was nothing. If you see the time lapse from sandbar to two launch towers, and a gigantic rocket factory with high bays. And we're going to be building something called the Gigabay, which is like one of the largest enclosed volumes on Earth. So it's sort of like a gigantic Borg cube that we're going to be building here for building and storing these gigantic rockets. It's really spectacular, and anyone can come and visit. So because we're on a public highway, and we're literally by a public beach, you can actually come and see the rocket. You quite close up. I mean, you can drive past it, and you can also look at the factory. And anyone can do this from anywhere in the world. So you can come and visit and check it out. So I think it's pretty cool that it's
Just not right now.
just not right.
Just not right
Obviously
now.
not when we're launching because there's some safety issues. But the rocket's often just sitting on the pad without any propellant in it, and then you can just come here and visit. It's very easy.
Yeah, I think it's a really special place. Yesterday, the ship went down the road behind us, and I saw families outside on Sunday going for their Sunday stroll, and they were greeted by Starship going down. And I think that from the very beginning, the thing about Starship, different than Falcon and other rockets that I'm aware of, is we designed it to be mass-produced and mass-produced at scale. And it's not about building one Starship and getting to orbit once. It's about doing it in a sustained and rapid way.
Yeah, we're aiming for ultimately thousands of ships to be built per year, which is what's needed in order to construct a city on Mars that is self-sustaining. And the major fork in the road of destiny will be when the Mars city is capable of surviving, even if the resupply ships from Earth stop coming for any reason. And that reason could be something cataclysmic, or it could be that that civilization simply subsided. There's always this debate throughout history of will civilization end with a bang or a whimper. But either way, if the critical thing is to get to the point where Mars is self-sustaining and can survive even if the resupply ships stop coming for any reason, which means that you need to build an entire base of industry on Mars in order for Mars to survive. For example, it's not simply enough to build a chip, like a computer chip factory, but you need the ability to build computer chip factories. So this is going to really take a lot of tonnage. I mean, my guess is at least 1 million tons to the surface of Mars, and maybe it takes less than that, but it's going to be a lot. But this is a very exciting future. It's one which will ensure the long-term survival and prosperity of life and consciousness, and it's the critical stepping stone to get from this solar system to other star systems, and perhaps go out there and explore, and perhaps we'll encounter alien civilizations that maybe they're alive now, or maybe they enjoyed a period of prosperity for millions of years, but also died out millions of years ago. So it's humbling to think of the age of the universe, according to the standard model of physics, being approximately 13.8 billion years old. So an incremental million years would be 3 digits past the decimal point. And if you look at, say, our civilization and measure our civilization by the first evidence of writing, which is about 5,500 years ago, civilization as measured from the first writing is only 1/1,000,000th of Earth's existence.
Or blip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flash in the pan so far.
Yeah. Well, we're getting some cool shots. Rocket out on the pad right now. We tell people, like, come down, see it. It's hard to get, like, a sense of scale of just how massive this thing is. And we were able to catch somebody working on it a little while ago. And, like, part of the reason you said we're sending millions of tons, that's kind of why this thing is so massive.
I think in this image, Dan, you can actually see the person working at the bottom of the ship. And as we zoom out, you see the full ship, that sort of two-tone silver and black, and then the booster below it, right? And it really sets the scale, which doesn't come across, I think, other than in person. And when I do tours, I like to say Starship is real, Starship is big, and Starship is really big. And I think you can see there, and with the factory shots you saw earlier, again, we've got Flight 10 on the pad, but we got many more behind it.
Yeah, so I posted a video yesterday of just a brief scan of part of the Starship factory, and you can get a sense of the scale of the factory. Yeah, I guess we could talk a bit about why Starship is the way it is. Like for example, why is half of the ship black and half of it is silver colored? And that's because the bottom half of the ship, the bottom as seen from orbital entry, has a heat shield on it. So the black there is the heat shield, and then the core structure of the rocket is a special alloy of stainless steel, and that's where you see the sort of shiny silver parts are stainless steel. The reason for steel over aluminum is that the heat of atmospheric entry and the heat of the rocket engines is enough to easily melt aluminum, but steel is much more resilient against both ascent heating, but especially the reentry heating. And you don't have to paint it, which is actually very difficult to paint a large object that is going through cryogenic cycles and have the paint stay on. It's quite challenging.
And so we've talked about it. It's massive. It obviously takes a whole lot of energy to make that thing move. And that's where Raptor really starts to come in, most advanced engine on the planet. Giant
yes.
lightsaber.
No, that's a lightsaber and a half. You would get vaporized in an instant if you were standing in front of Raptor. So, burnt to a crisp in less than a second. So in order to create a fully reusable orbital rocket, you have to advance the state of the art in every part of the rocket. That means the engines have to be better than any engine ever. The structure's got to be better than any structure ever. You've got to have a means of bringing the rocket back to the launch pad. You've got to have a fully reusable orbital heat shield, and that no one has ever made a fully reusable orbital heat shield. The space shuttle, for example, required 9 months of refurbishment between flights. So the space shuttle heat shield would come back essentially partially broken and would require many months of refurbishment in order to fly again. What we're trying to achieve here with Starship is to have a heat shield that can be flown immediately. So the ship, both the ship and the booster, would be caught by the tower arms, and the booster would be placed immediately back on the launch stand, and the ship's got to orbit Earth at least once, but then could be back potentially in one orbit, but in most cases several orbits. So the ship would come back several hours later, but then be caught by the arms and placed on top of the booster. You can also have multiple ships ready so that a single booster could service 5 or more ships, so that you could be flying the booster in theory, every hour. This is kind of a profoundly fast speed, obviously, for the largest flying object by far ever made. But it's the reason why we catch the booster with the tower arms, and the ship also will be caught with the tower arms, because that's the fastest way to get the booster and the ship back to flight. If we had instead put landing legs, which we have done before for the ship tests, we actually had landing legs that flipped down, and the ship we've successfully demonstrated landing with legs. But if you do that, if we were to do that with the booster and the ship, here we'd have to land somewhere else with the legs, then lift the rocket, stow the legs, transport the rocket back to the pad, which is very unwieldy when you've got a gigantic thing. Then it would be picked up by these tower arms and placed in the launch mount. That would delay the reusability dramatically and would add a lot of mass with the landing legs. So that's why we catch the rocket with the tower arms, because it's the same tower arms that put the rocket in the launch mount are used to catch the rocket. And that means that we can put the booster back in the launch mount in less than an hour after liftoff. In fact, the booster is going to come back very fast. 5 or 6 minutes later, this booster is coming back one way or another, or not coming back. So then you really have propellant full time, which can be brought down to about 30, 40 minutes. And that means it is theoretically possible to fly the booster again in less than an hour.
And I think when I think about it, it's the jet drives up to the jetway, the people get off, new people get on, and it leaves. You don't want to land the jet on a different airfield and then tow it over to the jetway. So it's just operationally simpler and faster.
Yeah, we've had a lot of success with the booster, 3 for 3 on the catch attempts. When we bring it back, we've reflown one, so awesome. And then Starship superpowers, the whole thing is reusable. So ship reusability is like what we're working on right now. We've been able to get some really spectacular reentries on a couple of flights, hoping to get this one for reentry on the V2 ship. But yeah, that fully reusable heat shield, that thing that has just never been done before, that's one of the things we're really looking for that data on.
Yeah, I mean, there are thousands of engineering challenges that remain for both the ship and the booster, but maybe the single biggest one is the reusable orbital heat shield. We are confident in making a fully reusable orbital heat shield, but it will require many flights, many iterations to figure out where the weak points are in the heat shield, where we need to change the design, either strengthening the tile or changing how big the gap is between tiles, changing what's underneath the tile. There's 100 different variables that we could tweak with the ship tiles, the heat shield tiles. But the only way to know exactly what we should be adjusting is to fly repeatedly and be able to examine the ship upon landing. And we have successfully brought the ship back through the atmosphere and achieved a soft landing multiple times. So we know that this is possible, but we have in the process shed many heat shield tiles. So we need to be able to do this without shedding heat shield tiles and do so repeatedly.
And I think what you're seeing now is the Starship, this is CG of it coming in and landing on the tower, much like the booster, but there's some additional challenges there where we need to make sure we don't scrape the tiles off as we slide along the chopstick
We can't
arms.
shuck the heat shield.
Don't crush the ship.
Rapid reusability.
If we shuck the tiles, then that's obviously going to fail the reusability test.
So ships can use the tower to land and catch like the booster here on Earth where towers are available. And for our initial landings on Mars and other planets, we'll need landing legs that deploy much like what you're seeing here with Ship 15 when we did our suborbital test to prove out the precision descent landing, which was a successful test. We actually landed two. One was we were able to actually recover it, and you can see it here in the rocket garden if you visit Starbase.
So the rocket garden that Bill mentioned, we have actually a whole bunch of boosters and ships, and we'll be adding to them over time. So you can see an evolution of Starship just by driving down the highway.
Yeah. So reusability is key. There's some other technologies we're still looking to prove out. Really big one is going to be the on-orbit refilling. Looking to do that next year, and that's really what's going to kind of unlock, Starship going everywhere else, going everywhere beyond Earth. And that's something that's, again, never been done before, kind of like that reusable orbital heat shield, but it's going to be something that's kind of some of the other secret sauce to Starship, where we're going to be able to send hundreds of tons per ship to Mars.
Yeah, I like to think of it as if we get to orbit with a full cargo bay, but we're empty on fuel and oxygen. So basically, we're running on fumes. Then we send other ships to dock, transfer propellant, and now we made our two-stage rocket look like a many, many multi-stage rocket. And we get all of that performance, and we can take that full cargo bay now wherever we want to go.
Yeah, so a crucial technology that we hope to demonstrate next year is this orbital refilling, much like aerial refueling. It's essential for being able to send significant payload to Mars. So you essentially send a ship to orbit with a few hundred tons of payload, sort of a filled payload bay. But once it gets to orbit, the tanks will be mostly empty. And then you send up additional tanker ships to refill the Mars ship's tanks so that it can thrust from Earth orbit to Mars and have enough propellant left for landing. So this is orbital refilling is also not something that's ever been demonstrated before. So that would be a brand new technology. We also have at SpaceX figured out how to dock repeatedly with the space station. So in a lot of ways, this is like docking, and in some ways it's easier in that we're the ship where SpaceX is docking with its own craft, but no one has ever demonstrated propellant transfer in orbit, to the best of our knowledge, and so this would be propellant transfer at a very large scale, and but with full reusability and propellant transfer, those are the key technologies needed for building a city on Mars, and I'm confident that the SpaceX team, which is incredibly talented, will achieve these goals, and we will be landing ships on Mars in the future and building life on Mars, building greenhouses and life on Mars, and ensuring the long-term survival of life as we know it. And it's important to note here that obviously, we are effectively stewards of life here on Earth. That the other creatures cannot build spacecraft and get to other planets. So if there were to be a cataclysmic event, like a giant meteor that destroyed the dinosaurs, or ultimately the sun will expand to envelop Earth and destroy all life, we know this is an undisputed fact. Then if we don't take life to another planet, all life will be destroyed. So it's incumbent upon us to ensure that we do bring life to other planets and ensure the long-term survival of life as we know it on planet Earth.
And I mean, aside from that, there's so much that Starship unlocks by being able to do these things. Like, we'll be able to go to Mars, but there are other just transformational things by being able to take that many people, that much stuff to space for that much less money.
Yeah, I mean, I think like understanding our planet better, being able to move people around the planet, make it feel smaller and more accessible. You could go anywhere on the Earth, in less than 40 minutes, basically, in terms of flight time. So I really do see Starship as being this thing that can connect us, just like Starlink connects our information. This can connect us more physically.
Yeah. So there's really nothing faster than a rocket. Really, an orbital rocket is the fastest thing that we know of of the fastest means of transport. So, like, you could go from LA to Sydney in less than half an hour. You could go LA to Tokyo in less than half an hour. You could go from New York to Singapore in half an hour. Everything's roughly half an hour, basically. But some things might be 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, yeah, sign me up for that, please. All right, cool.
Cross the Atlantic in 10 minutes, no problem.
Please, yes, sign me up.
You're going 25 times the speed of sound, so that's 30 times faster than a commercial aircraft.
And it's a whole hell of a lot better view.
Yeah, it's a hell of a view.
Yeah. All right, cool. Anything else, guys? Anything else you're really excited about
we could
coming
say
out?
a lot more.
Yeah.
Maybe we should go check in on the rocket and get on
All right,
console.
we're going to go back on console to hopefully the weather supports a launch tonight. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for your support.
Thanks for crashing,
bye.
guys.
All right.
Time now T-minus 19 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. At this point in the count, SpaceX is just now getting into the mode where they are chilling down the 33 Raptor engines on the Super Heavy booster and the 6 on the ship upper stage. Want to bring back in Stephen Clark, space reporter with Ars Technica, who is down there at Starbase monitoring the weather for us in person, but also has been listening into what, by all accounts, appears to have been the promised technical talk between Bill and Elon. So, Stephen, your initial thoughts on the comments we just heard from the chief engineer and the vice president of Starship Engineering.
Yeah, well, I think that was a lot of that. If our listeners and viewers have tuned into Starship launches before or followed the program, it's nothing really new to them. A couple of things popped out to me. You mentioned, I think Bill Riley, the vice president of Starship Engineering, mentioned the first, quote, operational launch of Starship from the second launch complex here at Starbase at the end of the year. I presume, although he didn't specify, I presume he's talking about the first version 3 launch of Starship at the end of the year, which kind of tracks with what we were expecting. Some good discussion from Elon Musk on the heat shield, and I think that's the real sticking point for making Starship rapidly reusable, is to get a heat shield in place, a design locked down that is resilient to all the forces and temperatures of reentry. And then Bill Riley mentioned something as well: the catch arms coming around the ship when it comes in for a catch. They want to make sure those don't cause any physical damage to the tiles either, because that would obviously require refurbishment and would not make the vehicle rapidly reusable, which is SpaceX's goal. Targeting in-orbit refueling tests next year, according to Elon Musk. That's really nothing new either. We knew that was targeted for next year, just given the delays they've had with the flights this year. So, a few updates there, although not the level of detail I think many SpaceX enthusiasts would have liked, but I'm not sure we were the audience for that, to be honest. So we'll see, how things go with today's launch, and if they can get the heat shield design locked down and gather some important data on today's flight, assuming the weather cooperates, and maybe we'll get a more detailed update from Elon Musk and other SpaceX officials down the road. One thing I'll note is no mention of the human landing system from Elon or Bill Riley for Artemis.
Yeah, with the photos that someone captured down at Starbase of what appeared to be the chairs inside the HLS version of Starship, was a little surprising that neither of them brought it up at all. I'll also just, going back to your point about the on-orbit refueling that Bill said was planning to happen next year. Musk has used this language before, but he said they hope to demonstrate it next year. He used the same phraseology of hope to do it next year when he spoke following Flight 9. So I wonder if there's some thought that, potentially it could slip out of 2026 and into 2027, which would certainly be potentially quite worrying for NASA's timeline of things if we go another year without that ship-to-ship propellant transfer demonstration. I can't imagine that an Artemis 3 mission in 2027 would have any chance of going forward at that point. But I suppose we'll have to wait and see when version 3 of ship is actually ready to fly.
Yep, good points, Will. And trying and doing are two different things. So, I wouldn't be surprised when they start testing and refueling that we see multiple attempts, just like we've seen, we saw multiple attempts with the Starship prototypes trying to land on those suborbital flights a few years ago before they could nail it. Multiple attempts for Starship version 1 to complete a launch before finally last year on, I think, the third try, getting Starship all the way to the Indian Ocean in one piece. So, I suspect in-orbit refueling will require multiple attempts as well.
Indeed. Well, with less than 15 minutes to go, we're going to go ahead and let Steven step away for a little bit. We'll check back in with him on the other side of liftoff, assuming that weather cooperates this go around. We're currently T-minus 14 minutes, 27 seconds, and counting to the planned launch of Starship Flight 10 from the now town of Starbase there in Texas, just north of the U.S.-Mexico border. Coming up next, the milestone that we're looking ahead towards is going to be the conclusion of ship prop load, which is coming up at T-minus 3 minutes and 20 seconds, and then booster prop load should wrap up about 30 seconds after that. taking a look at a pre-produced video now being shared by SpaceX, looking at their Starship or Starlink production site in Redmond, Washington. This, of course, is SpaceX's most often flown payload on its Falcon 9 rockets. Getting a really good look at these Starlink V2 Mini optimized satellites here on the various components. That was the laser link they were just seeing and see right here in this part of the video. Starship will launch a much larger version of Starlink satellites known as version 3, which we will hopefully, if the launch goes forward and ship has a nominal flight, SpaceX is set to deploy 8 of these simulator Starlink satellites, which have a similar size and mass. This is certainly our best view of a V2 Mini optimized satellite that we've seen from SpaceX, going far beyond just the graphical representation that we've seen predominantly, or of course the launch stack of them on a Falcon 9 rocket. It's actually quite nice to see a full production line of these satellites going through the process there in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle. Unfortunately, this video does have music embedded within it, which is likely copyright, so to not incur copyright strike from YouTube, we're unfortunately unable to share the music of this with you, but want to make sure you show the video here. There's a shot of Pad 40. Less than 10 minutes to go to the flight of Starship Flight 10. And again, those simulators, satellites will be deployed beginning at about T plus 18 minutes and 27 seconds. Actually, there's an animation of this. Let's go ahead and bring that in, John. This is what the deployment sequence will look like. This is an updated version of the jettison of these simulators. This animation featuring the Block 2 version of ship. This animation shows a stack of operational Starlink satellites being jettisoned on a future orbital flight of Starship. Today's flight will be a suborbital flight, which means the Starlink simulators will follow the same path as ship, and assuming a nominal flight, will also splash down in the Indian Ocean as well. SpaceX commentator Dan Hout says that the range is currently red for weather for an anvil cloud, as Stephen and I were talking about earlier in the broadcast. He said that that is hoping to clear in the next few minutes here. Of course, they only have a handful of minutes really before the planned T0. But unlike a Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy rocket, SpaceX does have the option to hold the countdown once they hit the T-minus 40-second mark, and can hold for several minutes if needed. Dan also says the vehicle is healthy and the range is clear as far as any potential violations for errant watercraft or aircraft. SpaceX says their current plan, as things stand now, is to take advantage of the next Mars window and to try and send uncrewed versions of ship to the red planet. they say from 2028 to 2029, some of the basic infrastructure will attempt to be flown to the red planet. Is, of course, a callback to the famous construction photo of those workers on the beam in, I believe, New York City. Instead, you're seeing the Optimus robots from another Elon Musk venture, Tesla. Of course, on the path for SpaceX to conduct its ambitious Mars missions are its obligations to NASA as part of the Artemis program. SpaceX is on contract to perform an uncrewed landing demonstration on the lunar surface before the Artemis 3 crewed mission, which is currently set to fly in mid-2027. These are tall goals for SpaceX to be able to launch Starship to Mars by the end of next year. Of course, standing in the way between that and missions to the moon will be, as Stephen and I were discussing, successfully conducting an on-orbit propellant demonstration and then doing so again multiple times. Booster is about 90% on both the liquid oxygen and liquid methane. Ship fueling should top off coming up here in less than 2 minutes. Nice view of the 33 Raptor engines at the base of the Super Heavy booster. Keep an eye out, they might do a wiggle test here in a moment. Or not. Less than 3 minutes to go now on the countdown to Flight 10. At this point, both the ship upper stage and the Super Heavy booster should be completely filled with their liquid oxygen and methane for fuel. Standing by to see if there's going to be any weather concerns that are a showstopper today. SpaceX's Dan Hout says they are still red on the range for weather. SpaceX does have the ability to hold the count at T-minus 40 seconds for several minutes. If it gets to the point where the water deluge system activates and then they have to call a scrub, they don't have the opportunity to hold again, since they would need to refill the water tanks for the deluge system. Less than 2 minutes to go before the planned flight. About a minute ahead of that waypoint at T-minus 40 seconds. There you see a little bit of a wiggle test. Saw some movement from those center 13 engines. Range still red for weather. Odds are we're coming into a hold in about 25 seconds. Less than a minute. We're standing by for a potential hold for weather. Let's listen in.
All right, and we did just get confirmation, so we are expecting to hold at T-minus 40. We are still red on the range for weather, so look for the clock to pause in just a couple seconds. And pause. So we'll hang out here for a couple of minutes. We do have until the end of the window. We won't have 30 minutes of hold time to hang out, as we can't, we're essentially not replenishing prop on the vehicle at this point, so we have to keep a close eye on things like temperatures inside the tanks. We can only hold for so many minutes before things start to warm up. Surprised it's hot in South Texas.
Yeah, while we're holding here at T-minus 40 seconds, we reviewed our test objectives for booster, but why don't we chat ship for a second? After stage separation, ship will continue onwards up through its ascent to the planned suborbital trajectory. Once it reaches there, we'll undergo SECO, or where the second stage shuts off its engines. We're hoping to deploy 8 dummy satellites today, which are modeled after Starlink V3. We're also planning to attempt a in-orbit burn, so we'll relight one of those Raptor engines while in space, and that will occur ahead of re-entry, where we'll also be testing multiple experiments, including missing tiles, metallic tiles, and intentionally loading those vehicles' flaps. And then hopefully we'll conclude today's test flight with a soft splashdown in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, definitely want to see a ship on the other side of the planet today. We did just get a quick update. So the range is fully green. Weather is still red. So we are still tracking a detached anvil rule, which essentially there's an anvil cloud that's too close to our launch site, and it needs to move further away. Until it moves further away, we can't lift off. So we are expecting an update in a couple of seconds, potentially. Again, we can hang out here for several minutes. We're not actively replenishing prop. And getting an update now. And we're getting a weather update right now. And team's looking at it. Again, we're just tracking this anvil rule still. It's our only blocker today. Range is green, vehicle is green. Weather is currently red. All right, and sad voice coming in. We did just hear that we are still going to be red. So at this point, we are essentially transitioning this to be a wet dress. So wet dress is when we fully load prop on board the rocket. So we are going to see the clock probably start up again. But once they get down to 10 seconds, they're going to abort out, and then we will be done for the day. So, sad news, not going to launch today. Weather got in our way, but you can only control so much. Can't always control the weather. Can't control the weather. I wish we could control the weather. We're not there yet.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't that be nice? So we are seeing the clock rolling, but again, we're going to get down to T-minus 10 seconds, and we're going to see that kick back out. And then we're going to start offloading all of the propellant that's on board the rocket today. So if you are just tuning in, Yeah, it's not going. There it goes. Back to T-minus 40. So, again, we essentially turned today into a wet dress. So today still ended up being a test.
Still learning something as always.
Yeah, still learning something. We were able to fix the issue that kind of bit us yesterday, where we had a leaky hose that was feeding liquid oxygen into the ship. But we were able to fix that, but weather got us today. So no launch today. We do have a phenomenal logistics team, though, so we should hopefully be able to replenish prop everything. We don't have to refill all the water tanks because we didn't fire off the deflector, but we'll have to reload the prop. So very good chance that we can try again tomorrow. We'll obviously update everybody online. And yeah, man, sorry we couldn't go today. Don't worry, we'll probably go tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you when we do go for launch.
So obviously, follow our account on X at SpaceX. We'll share information as soon as it comes available. We'll also be updating the web at spacex.com. So thanks for joining us today.
And of course, less than ideal end to the day, but as SpaceX said, they can't control the weather, and sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles. Teams are optimistic that potential launch can move forward tomorrow, so we will, of course, be ready and waiting to bring you live launch coverage should that be able to happen, or whenever SpaceX is ready to launch or attempt to launch Starship Flight 10. If the launch does happen tomorrow and all things remain equal, it presents once again another double launch day for SpaceX. Now we are looking at both the launches potentially of Starship Flight 10 from Starbase, Texas, alongside the NOWS mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base. That is a payload launching on behalf of OHB Italia, alongside several other rideshare payloads. Set to lift off from Space Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California, with a 27-minute launch window that opens up at 11:53 a.m. Pacific. That is 2:53 p.m. Eastern, 18:53 UTC for our friends around the world. So it'll be a quite packed afternoon into the evening with those two missions, essentially creating back-to-back broadcasts for us here at Spaceflight Now. So we're going to go ahead and wind things down so our team can rest up and get ready for that coverage coming up tomorrow. Well, tomorrow at least for the NOWS mission. We'll have to see if SpaceX is ready for Starship tomorrow as well. Be sure to check out our website, spaceflightnow.com, for the latest on this and other launch operations that are happening in Texas and Florida and California and elsewhere around the world. Do want to thank a few folks before we go ahead and sign off, because we had a number of super chats that came in during the technical talk about Starship. So thanks to Super Tech Boy for a $2 super chat going to Spaceflight Now's Caffeine Fund. Thank you. Mitchell Wilbur, been a member with us now for a solid 2 years at the mission specialist level. Says, good to be back in the game. Of course, that was before the scrub. Frank B with a $20 super chat. Thank you, Frank, for your support at that level. Crazy Bird Lady, great handle, the $2 super chat, showing some appreciation to Elon Musk. Andre, also with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Andre. Saying Mars 2.0. Jeff Quintrall saying this is great in a $5 super chat. Again, this is before the scrub. Hope all goes well. United Nations Space Command has been a member with us also for a solid 2 years. Who says hello from Cape Coral. Hoping to get a glimpse of the upper stage in the southern skies. Thank you for amazing coverage. Well, hopefully you get some views like that whenever SpaceX is actually able to launch the mission. Also, thanks to James Wise for a $20 super chat. Thank you, James. And for gifting 20 Spaceflight Now memberships as well. Tim H with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Tim. Cindy Price with a $10 super chat who says, thank you, Spaceflight Now, for factual coverage. Little to no politics. Love it. Certainly try to keep it that way. And also thanks to Mitchell Wilbur for a very generous $50 super chat. Really appreciate that, Mitchell. Thank you so much for your support at that level. The back end of the week is also expected to be quite busy for SpaceX. In addition to the mission from California, teams are also planning on a couple of Starlink missions from here in Florida. One, the Starlink 10-56 mission, looking to launch from Pad 40 just about sunrise on Wednesday the 27th. With 28 Starlink V2 mini satellites on board. Then the following day, the morning of the 28th at 1:27 a.m. Eastern, another Starlink mission, this one Starlink 10-11. That's looking to send another batch of 28 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit. I will note, though, that Starlink mission, Starlink 10-11, is set to feature Falcon booster B1067, which is going to once again further cement its place as the booster flight leader for SpaceX and make its 30th trip to space. It'll be the first such booster to do so as SpaceX works to certify its first stages for up to 40 flights apiece. Looking to close out the week with one more Starlink launch over on the West Coast. That'll be Starlink 17-7. It's set to lift off at about 7:05 p.m. Eastern. Or Pacific, I should say. 10:05 p.m. Eastern, 7:05 p.m. Pacific. As we close things out, I want to thank our friend Stephen Clark with Ars Technica, one of their space reporters, alongside Eric Berger, for joining us with our coverage today. And actually, it looks like we were able to get Stephen back once more before we go ahead and close things out. So, Stephen, second strike at bat for SpaceX on this mission. Not a technical issue, which is good news. They can bounce back from weather, but certainly disappointing to get so close and then have to wait at least another day yet.
Yes, not entirely surprising, given the conditions seem to be deteriorating throughout the late afternoon to early evening hours. I mentioned earlier we stayed dry today for the most part here at Starbase, but those storms off to the west really popped off, and the upper level winds are blowing the tops of those storms, the anvil clouds, out over us here on the Texas coast. So the concern with the anvil clouds, of course, is the potential for a lightning that could be triggered as the rocket climbs through them. So if our viewers or your viewers have seen many launches, they know that's a regular issue or concern from launches down at Kennedy Space Center, where there's a lot of lightning. And we saw that pop up again today here in Texas. So try again tomorrow if everything goes well. Again, no technical issues with the vehicle or the range. And I think overnight we'll probably see a lot of fueling tankers, liquid oxygen tankers primarily come into Starbase to replenish the tanks out at the launch pad to be ready to go again tomorrow.
Yeah, just looking at the weather from down on South Padre Island, a little bit north of Starbase, of course, but looking like also going to be cloudy conditions throughout the course of the day tomorrow. So hopefully things actually break a little bit better than what they are appearing to look like in the forecast. You know, not wishing a 2-day delay, but I will say, just looking at the rest of the week, Wednesday through Sunday appears to be perfectly sunny conditions down at Starbase. So, you know, if they really want to get entirely clear of the weather, Wednesday might actually be the best day for them. Of course, for all those who've traveled down to Starbase like yourself, we're all hoping for a launch tomorrow so that SpaceX can begin to make plans moving on to Flight 11.
Yep, certainly hoping it goes sooner rather than later and also goes well. And I think today was very close because I'm starting to see a little blue sky appear off to the east, higher in the sky over Starbase. So, you know, I think if they had targeted the end of the window, for example, they might have had a better shot at launching, but hindsight's always 20/20.
Yes, indeed. You could just see a little bit of that blue sky on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, what Stephen was just mentioning. So thank you, Stephen, for joining us. And again, you can read up on all of Stephen's work at Ars Technica alongside his colleague covering the Space Beat, Eric Berger, at arstechnica.com. You can also find him on X. Stephen, just because I haven't memorized it, your handle once more, folks could follow you on X to keep up with your work there as well.
Sure, my handle is @StephenClark1 on X.
Super easy, barely an inconvenience. Thanks, Stephen. We'll check back in with you whenever SpaceX is ready to fly. Fingers crossed. That's tomorrow. And want to go ahead and thank our team as well for all their hard work today. Thanks to our moderators in the live chat, to Jeff Hansen and Mark Otto for holding it down, keeping things kosher in the live chat today. Thanks to our photographer, John Pisani, and to our editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast behind the scenes. Most importantly, want to thank you for wherever you've been watching from today. Certainly appreciate your time and attention, especially when it comes to these big missions. And we look forward to welcoming you back in again with tomorrow's potential for a double launch day. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. Hit that subscribe button on the way out the digital door, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.